Thanks again for joining us. Today we're talking about those of you that are unsure about the current state and the future of your PPM platform. So we have a lot to share. I'm taking sort of a unique approach in how we deliver this presentation and trying to give you guys as much value and as much information as possible, both in terms of evaluating the current state, determining next steps, what actions you can take along the way. And one of the key elements to this is really helping you discover what is your philosophy around how you size, plan, forecast, deliver on your work. And that's going to be a key part of this journey. And frankly, where we see the most success are those customers that clearly identify what philosophically is their approach. And we'll talk about that in detail. So I'm going to try to throw out as much stuff as possible. We have an hour planned. It's entirely possible I go beyond that, in which case this will be recorded and made available. I understand everyone has time constraints. We'll see how it goes. But again, the goal here is to get you as much information as possible. This is what the agenda looks like. We'll start with sort of an intro of why are we here, what is the problem, so we'll sort of set the stage. Then diverge a bit as we talk a little bit about us, ProSymmetry, and also share with you some of the product updates that are shipping really soon and sort of where we're going to be in the market. In terms of attending shows, webinars, and so on. Then we'll really drill into the problem. What's driving concerns around PPM platforms, both those that are in the installed base as well as those that are being considered. And frankly, a lot of organizations are kind of juggling things and trying to understand, do we really need a pure play PPM solution, or is it something else? Which I think is, again, ties back closely to that whole philosophical discussion. We'll then talk through some techniques for identifying your next steps. A lot of people don't make progress because they just don't know where to start. It's much easier, I think, when we walk through it than you might have in your head. I recognize there are other organizational challenges. There can be other blockers and so on, but we'll talk through a number of those. We'll also talk through a case study, fairly brief, and we're happy to cover those things in more detail separately for those of you that are interested. And we'll also talk about things you should look for in vendors. This is a very honest presentation. For some of you, we might be a great fit. For others, maybe not. But we want to give you as much info as possible. And then we'll wrap up with some next steps. So let's jump into things. So what are we seeing in the market? And because we do so many events, and look, we've been growing at a fairly high rate just organically in terms of adding new customers and new capabilities to our product, that we run into this a lot. But we also talk to thousands of enterprises every year. We attend last year something like 10 or 12 different industry events, some Gartner, some regional, some local events, where we're just talking to a huge volume of those that operate, manage, or consume what you might consider PPM data. And the frequency of those that are telling us they have a failed or broken PPM deployment, and those that are just starting to evaluate how to best size, plan, and execute their work is exceptionally high. So we're getting a lot of this feedback. We're also running into an increasing number of folks who are rising in the ranks in a multi-methodology environment, and maybe they've been tasked with as a developer, a senior developer, and they're now rising into a position where they're being asked to provide governance and oversight into the delivery of the work being performed in an agile and or mixed methodology environment. More likely the latter, and they're sort of grasping at straws. Like, how do we address this? Is PPM the right way to go? Is there something else? So we'll talk about this obviously in today's presentation. But again, those that are currently deployed, a lot of unease around their current investment, lack of return on investment, difficult to deploy, difficult to maintain, and there's a lot of rumbling in the market across various platforms and even vendors who have either outright abandoned the space. There's been a ton of acquisition in the space, which has made things a bit more tricky and difficult for folks that made certain investments. And we'll talk about that as we move through the presentation today. All right. So when we thought about putting this together, we really wanted to help the market in terms of how it addresses approaching this PPM challenge. All right. And some key points I think you'll pull away from today would be, you may not need what is conventionally referred to as a PPM solution, and or there might be a mix of tools or a single platform that does the key things you need it to do, and it might have ancillary capabilities which you rate slightly lower, but they're good enough. So a lot of this will come down to use case, to feature mapping and that philosophical discussion. And again, that one to me is really going to be the most critical. But there's no doubt the environment overall is more complex than it's ever been, and we'll talk through that today. All right. The obligatory about us, our philosophy has always tightly aligned with the resource management philosophy versus the task orientation. There's certainly overlap, but that's where we've lived, and we continue to invest very heavily in that space. What I have on the screen at the moment is from Gartner Peer Insights. You'll hear a bunch of stuff from Gartner, but again, they publish really great content and have really good coverage of this space. So I'd encourage you to look at Peer Insights throughout this process, both to pull information about the market, about vendors, about how others are experiencing this phenomenon, and pull from it what you'd like. But obviously you can see we score off the charts on scalability, capacity, and resource management. Again, our alignment there being very heavy, security, user management, and usability. But again, really important stuff here can be pulled from the Gartner Peer Insights. And what I think you should also consider is that when you go to look at solving this challenge is, again, the philosophical alignment with vendors, but understanding the full depth and breadth of their capabilities. Because while you may align very tightly with the resourcing side of the challenge, you may need other elements that are more conventional PPM by nature, things like demand management and financials and timesheeting, reporting and analytics. And what you need is a vendor that can do those things enough while still addressing the core aspects of what you're trying to solve. So we'll talk through that in today's discussion. So some of the things we're looking to do in the coming months for the rest of the year, obviously we're out in the market pretty heavily. Some upcoming shows and webinars in Q3 will be at the Institute for Internal Auditors International Show. That's happening, I believe, next month. We'll also be at the Gartner Apps Summit in London, the PMI Global in Los Angeles, and we're also working jointly with SAFE, Scaled Agile Framework, to deliver a webinar on how we do capacity planning in a Scaled Agile environment. That's definitely one to mark on your calendar. That'll be in late July. And if there's questions on any of these, please let us know. We can follow up separately. And then in Q4, we'll be at both Gartner IT Symposium Expos, both in the US and Barcelona. We'll be launching an entirely new product at those events, so we're very excited for that. And then we'll wrap up the year at the House of PMO Edinburgh up in Scotland. Now, a number of you are current clients. Others might just be evaluating, but did want to share a few things that are coming in the next couple of months here with the 9.2 release. One of the really big features we'll be releasing in 9.2 is a team-based planning capability. So to date, we've always had standard sort of labor resources, human resources, generic placeholder resources. But increasingly, our customers are asking us for the ability to plan by teams, and not sticking so tightly with sort of the agile approach dictating that someone has to be part of a team exclusively. Our customers are doing a mix of agile, operational, and waterfall type of work, and they're putting people on one team, multiple teams, pulling them off of the teams to do direct assignments. And so it's just the reality of what we're seeing and what our customers are seeing. So we'll introduce this team resource capability. You can build these teams. You can put different people on them at different points in time. You can have the same folks assigned to different teams in different quantities over time, and also allocate them individually. You'll be able to assign people to teams proportionally, so by percentage or by month. So someone may drop off of a team for months. You can add them back on as needed. We'll also allow you to define team velocities by month. Will allow you to auto-calculate costs based on the team members and their association by percentage to the team, or you can set override rates. This will also flow through to timesheeting if you're using timesheets with team resources, and we'll also introduce the ability to plan by story points. So a really big feature add coming in 9.2 around team resource planning. There's also a whole host of additional capabilities coming with 9.2, ranging from additional language support to this feature of My Sheets, allowing end users to update data in separate lists. Maybe it's training, maybe it's certifications, maybe it's historical experience information. And then you'll find a range of other features around new views, additional WCAG accessibility related updates, new features in the what if modeling, extended modeling periods, 20-year duration, delta views along what if financials, impact assessments and financial grids. and updates of dependencies and what-if models. So beyond the team planning, again, a very large number of updates coming to the product, like with every release where we make extensive investments in our product. Also, end of the year, and this is something we'll launch, and we're starting to message it now, so you're getting a bit of a preview. We will launch our strategic portfolio management product at the Gartner IT Expo in Orlando in late October. This is Tempest Portfolio. So for those of you that have worked with us for years, we focused on bottom-up planning, resource capacity planning from the project level up. Tempest Portfolio is going to allow you to do all the same things, but from the portfolio level down. Both financial planning, budgeting, and resource forecasting and planning from various portfolio, strategy, initiative, OKR, and milestone levels, and create relationships between those different objects, and in real time identify gaps, do real-time dashboarding to identify where we're over and under budgets, identifying and setting alignment with strategies and business objectives and our investments across the portfolio. So look for more information coming soon on the new Tempest Portfolio product, which again will launch in late October. So we're very excited for this. Okay, now before we jump into the bulk of the presentation, again, we're here to help. We have hundreds of years collectively of experience, direct experience with PPM products. Before joining ProSymmetry, I was head of pre-sales engineering for Microsoft's PPM products in the Midwest US. Other members of the team have extensive experience both deploying, operating, selling, managing PPM products of different types. And we're happy to share experiences and background. So regardless of where you are in your evaluation or analysis, we're here to help you. Again, we may not be the right fit for you as a product, but we don't care. It's helpful for us to assist in the market and work with you now and better understand the challenges you're facing, and that really helps us to refine our understanding of the market. So we do and will offer to anybody on this webinar a PPM assessment offering, or in addition, a resource management assessment offering, where we can provide some feedback, help identify what might be the next best steps for you to take as part of this evaluation process. So please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to me directly or any other member of the ProSymmetry team. You can go to prosymmetry.com and submit for assistance there as well. So we're looking forward to helping the market. Okay, so let's move on to the core aspect of today's presentation and this uneasiness about the future of your PPM platform. So lots to talk about. And there certainly could be many, many more reasons behind this uneasiness, but I put together what I generally see when talking to customers, or what I'm generally hearing when talking to customers, prospects, or others at shows, one-to-many events, and elsewhere. So this is, again, just a number of them. There's certainly more, but the big ones I see. So the first one, and probably the most poignant, especially as a vendor in the space, is vendor abandonment. There's been a number of vendors who have openly told their customers or just the market that there's no longer going to be investment in a certain platform. We've seen this from Microsoft. We've seen this from others who I won't name on the call. But number one, the lack of investment in a product is pretty much spells its doom, its demise. And then with the acquisitions that we've seen in the industry, by strategics, by private equity, it's sort of a forced conversion, asking customers or telling them, hey, look, you bought product A, that company was acquired, and now you're being told you now need to move to product B if you want to remain in support. Otherwise, that product will essentially be deprecated. So we're seeing a lot of this, and there's rationales behind it, why they are doing it, but it doesn't matter to you. What it should matter to you is that the vendor's essentially walking away from the space, or they found greener pastures in their business and don't wish to be part of this. Number two, this one, probably the most in terms of frequency, is the challenges around competing methodologies. And this also starts to get into all the different tools that are floating around there. There was a great article in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago about just the sheer number of work management, task management tools floating around, and how businesses are having challenges really getting a handle on what is happening, and oftentimes leaving sort of the preference for that very granular tooling down to the different end users. But that's, again, totally separate from a PPM-related challenge around how we size our work, plan it, execute it across the organization. But we are seeing, again, competing methodologies of agile, of operational, of waterfall converging. And this is not just IT, but product development, R&D, and others, especially as software, firmware, hardware, software become core elements to really any product in the market. And you're going to now start to see more and more agile related methodologies and tooling, at least for the immediate planning intervals or immediate planning horizon, make their way into product and R&D related business lines, something that hasn't been there before. So when these things collide, a lot of customers have confusion around, well, how do I scale, how do I size my work, how do I roll up my work, how do I identify what's being delivered and when I have these different competing methodologies. So this is driving a lot of concern, and again, another topic we hear quite frequently. Also, analyst coverage and market split. Again, we're big consumers of Gartner stuff. We do a lot of their shows. Gartner split that core PPM coverage into subcategories. They've called them APM, or Adaptive Project Management and Reporting, and Strategic Portfolio Management. So this has caused a number of folks to sort of question, well, is my PPM product keeping up? Do I need two separate products? Can one do all of the above? Can I live with multiple? And we've also seen the market, whether it's through funding or just opportunity, we've seen a number of smaller team-oriented or task-oriented tools emerge. All of them have a very clear ceiling. They're not PPM products. They're not going to provide portfolio-level depth or oversight or insight, and they're generally for small teams. So if you're a smaller team of, let's say, up to 30, 40, maybe top level 50, you can maybe get away with those to a certain extent, but they're going to be lacking on feature depth, which is going to rob you of option value down the road and really going to put you back into the position of looking for a more PPM-oriented solution in short order. So those are some of the things causing challenges around analyst coverage and market split. Also, again, number 4, tons of market consolidation. We are actually at the moment on the Adaptive Project Management and Reporting Magic Quadrant. I think we're the only founder-owned company on that MQ. All others are owned by public companies or are private equity-backed. And in general, obviously, when you're private equity-backed or owned by a strategic public company, the business changes considerably in the way they think about customers, the way they think about pricing, the way they think about product investment is going to be markedly different. And it may not benefit you. And I think a lot of folks are dealing with that situation today. We certainly hear a lot of it at the shows we go to. Number 5, there's just a staggering number of failed implementations out there. And I think a lot of it has to do with, number 1, not setting the right expectations out of the gate. So it's not necessarily the products are entirely at fault. I think a lot of customers fail to set that philosophical boundary when they begin and define their core use cases. And of course, many of the historical players in the space who maybe not there anymore make very big and deep commitments and promises around what the customer can expect to see, and that may not be accurate, and it may not actually come to fruition. So, questionable ROI, and in many cases we see sort of these Frankenstein PPM deployments where customers are using them for maybe just time sheeting or just intake workflows, or they have a form that they use there, and they've spent a staggering amount of money, and they're essentially now doing all of the core planning, sizing, delivery using, let's say, Excel spreadsheets. That's kind of where we live. Those are our customers coming to us who wind up moving to Tempus from that sort of distributed Excel-based problem set. And then number 6 is the big one from my perspective. This is really key, which is this philosophical misalignment. Do you really need a PPM solution at all? Are there other product categories better suited? Is a more pure resource management system that does some of the PPM stuff better suited? Should you be looking at just more of a task execution or task sequencing product? Do you need the full depth and breadth of a PPM solution? And we'll talk more about how we identify this philosophical alignment as we move through the presentation. So these are some of the things that we see, or I see, driving some of the concerns around PPM. Now, where should you start? So these are some things I put together. It's not definitive, but this is what I've seen work. And number 1 might be iterative. You may not know what is your philosophy out of the gate. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And you may use this exercise to sort of discover or back into what exactly is your philosophy. And the steps here, again, seem fairly straightforward. There's depth behind each one, and having a good partner to walk you through it is really helpful and critical, or a consultant or someone that's done this before can be quite helpful. But if you do know your philosophy out of the gate, that does make the rest of these steps much easier. It makes vendor evaluation and vendor discussion and discovery much easier. But if not, this really has to start with your core use cases. Again, it just seems straightforward and basic, but that's really what we're after here. It doesn't have to be any smarter than that. Now, identifying what those core use cases are, that might be more involved. You might go through separate exercises to kind of score and rank the key use cases. But you do want to keep this pragmatic, and you want to avoid the typical scope creep that you see from various system evaluations. And you may also want to be wary of any vendor that takes you down the road of expanding that scope to additional licensing and products that they might be selling as part of their platform or platforms that they have. But the key piece here is first come up with what are the core use cases. The second piece here, number 3 in this case, is creating a matrix of what are all of the key features and capabilities offered by, in this case, the PPM vendors. And you may want to augment that and add more to it. And then what are your use cases? When we integrate the two, what type of heat map do we put together? And this can just be 0, 1. It can be binary. You don't have to score the alignments at all. You can just start with a mapping operation, and we'll walk through this in a moment, to see where do these results cluster, which when we walk all the way backwards is likely going to illuminate your philosophy. If you're seeing heavy density or central density around task execution, document management, collaboration, and communications, you might be more of the task-oriented philosophy. If you're seeing central density around resource request workflows, skills management, resource replacement, scenario planning, then again, you're likely going to be more resource-oriented in your philosophy. But starting with use cases, mapping them to the PPM capabilities, and then identifying and ranking, or identifying where that clustering exists, is essentially the exercise you should go through before you start really addressing the market heavily and identifying and narrowing down vendors. And that will likely also point out where is your philosophy, where does it lie. And by the way, that's not a bad thing, identifying and setting a philosophy now, or even if you, it's a point in time, and all of these things do evolve. So saying that you're resource-oriented now or task-oriented now is not a bad thing. Down the road, you might evolve, the business might change, and you might say, look, what's more important to us now is more resource-oriented than it had been previously. And that's not an uncommon thing to see. All right, it's not a lifelong commitment. Now, under the line here, these are separate processes and studies you'll likely want to perform before you really go to market and identify the right vendors to work with. The first is performing a sizing study. And what do I mean here? This has to do with how large of a data set are you working with? How many projects? How many resources? The density of tasks, the density of metadata, audit information. All of these things add up, and oftentimes will then eliminate a large number of vendors that won't either be able to scale, are not designed to handle that quantity of data, or it might become a licensing issue. We recently ran into a vendor that we use where we started getting charged more because we needed to add more attributes to a list. So these are things to understand out of the gate, the size of the data you're working with. This can also be useful when you're looking at things like the Gartner MQs, which are great. They're not perfect, but one element that's missing is another dimension around sizing of the data that the vendors can work with. And that may, again, give you now a filtered list of vendors to work with. So understanding the size of the data you're working with, the types of data, are really critical. The next step here is performing an inventory. What do you have today? What are people using today? This can point out challenges you may have around change management. They may also illuminate some of your philosophy. We'll talk more about that as we move forward. Again, if you're seeing a lot of Excel spreadsheets floating around with resource forecasts, you're likely have a resource-oriented philosophy, and clearly your current PPM is not solving that. So this inventory study is going to be big. It's also going to be really important when you get to doing things like cost justification. If 5 different people have bought 5 different products, be prepared to have to address those scenarios when it comes time to getting funding. And then also, you'll need to evaluate and identify any related systems, and this will tie into the extent to which you'll need to perform integrations or have the ability to tie the selected new product, whether it's PPM or related, to other systems. Do you have Workday in place? And do you have to onboard resources through Workday? Do you have SAP or some other financial related system or ERP that you have to send data to for financial information? All of those things are going to be relevant and will also be relevant as you evaluate and look at vendors. Do they have a robust API? Do they have the ability to consume information? Do they have the ability to send me notifications programmatically? And how complex is it to interact with those gateways and APIs? How secure are they, and so on? So all of these things will also play a role when you get to market to evaluate which are the right vendors, and also when you evaluate and sort of bake off the various capabilities. Now, identifying your philosophy, I've mentioned that a few times, and I'll continue to do so throughout the presentation. But again, in our experience, and mine in particular, when those customers identify their philosophy, whether it's, and when I say philosophy, I'm really talking about, are you resource-oriented or task-oriented? Because it can really boil down to product architecture that is going to set you up for success or set you up for failure. In my experience, customers that pick and identify the right philosophy and acknowledge it out of the gate have much more successful selections and implementations of the appropriate tooling. Now, 3 possible paths here for identifying your philosophy, and again, there could be others. But the first is really what we'll walk through today, which is that clustering of requirements. What are your use cases? What are the various features and capabilities out there? And where do you find density in those associations? So literally building a sort of a cluster map to see those interrelationships can point out, hey, look, I thought I was this type, but based on our core needs as a business, these use cases, these 2, 3, 4, 5 use cases, again, our density is around resource request workflows, skills management, high-level t-shirt sizing, but we also have a little bit of demand management out there. So you have something ancillary, but our density is around the resourcing side, and that may tell you, again, where philosophically you're aligned. Another option is to look at your ecosystem. So we can tell pretty clearly from our customer base that those that are often resource aligned or resource oriented will have a spreadsheet mess across their business. They went with a PPM product. The vast majority of PPM products are not built around the resource object. They're built around the task object for task execution. That's where they grew up and how they've evolved. We were built from the beginning around the resource object, making us unique architecturally. And oftentimes for those folks that went the PPM path, they'll have a small number or a massive number of spreadsheets floating around the business to answer questions around capacity planning, resource allocation, resource assignments. And that's a pretty clear indication that by reviewing that ecosystem, it's likely a resource-oriented business or has a resource-oriented philosophy. The third option or third possibility is there's already an articulated vision. There are some customers that have done either by way of separate analyses or they just know that their top 1, 2, or 3 core challenges is resource management or resource related. And those folks will generally understand that out of the gate, and as a result, they're philosophically aligned along the resource dimension. Others will know out of the gate, look, task execution and financial tracking, and hence task orientation are more important to us. So some will know it for whatever reason. Others need to review ecosystem. Others will need to go through this exercise of mapping use cases to key capabilities and features to sort of back into that philosophy. Again, this is a point in time. It may be for a number of years. It may be forever, but others may change as the business evolves. But these are a few different options for identifying philosophically, are you aligned with the resource orientation or are you aligned with the task orientation? This is another simple test of philosophy. This is a slide we've used for years, and it's from a customer that's been with us for 8 years and went from 1 business unit to I think something like 8, and we're now their centralized resource management system of record globally. So this business unit is a medical device. It's a medical device business. It's a global business, and this particular division was product development as well as R&D. They had 2 PPM tools. They were managing over 500 projects. multiple steering committees and boards, multiple PMOs, multiple cost centers, thousands of resources, and they had over 1,000 Excel files where they were doing their capacity planning, resource allocation, resource forecasting, and even resource assignments. This is a scenario where it's pretty clear in our experience that this is a resource-oriented or philosophically resource-oriented business. So if you have a scenario like this, maybe not the same scale, but you've tried the PPM route, but you're still falling back on spreadsheets, it's likely your alignment philosophically is to the resourcing side. Okay, so moving on to the modern PPM capabilities, and I've put up here what I'd consider all of the core capabilities, and I've grouped them together and clustered them into 3 areas. The first, resource management. That's obviously where we sit, and that's that can be a very large portion of what a PPM product may deliver. We may disagree on how they deliver it. Then you have your legacy PPM capabilities, the sort of standard stuff that everyone expects, the demand management, the intake, financial management, maybe some what if, but typically around financials, not around resourcing. Document management, alerting, issues and risks, road mapping, reporting and BI, milestones. And what I've done is I've separated the detailed task scheduling and agile planning into task sequencing. I've done that because there's been such an explosive growth of different agile planning tools, small team planning tools, task sequencing tools, ranging from Jira, ADO, all the way out to Smartsheet, Rike, ClickUp, and the list kind of goes on and on. The task sequencing, I've also separated it because what we're seeing, the same in that Wall Street Journal article, the same if you just look across the market, is that our customers will typically have, even when they're going down this PPM evaluation process, they're likely going to have a number of task sequencing tools that they just have to live with. The prospect of eliminating and standardizing everybody on a particular task sequencing or task execution tool, it's maybe not realistic. In fact, you're likely going to see a Microsoft project that's floating around. Maybe some groups have a Smartsheet. And there's preferences by those end users. And again, they're talking about sequencing of tasks, which don't play as critical a role in the overall PPM landscape as maybe in years past people had implied. Again, this PPM should be a higher level governance-related function of sizing work, planning, and execution. The actual delivery and task of the task sequencing can be offloaded to varying tools. Now, some of you may push back on that. That's our perspective on it. That's what many analysts think and many other players in the space believe. But this is what I've broken out. And the intent here is to show you how these different features line up to what you might consider as not necessarily a pure PPM product. So if you were to find alignment with skills management, resource workflows, top-down T-shirt sizing of work, and not having to build out massive project schedules or complex iterations and epics and sprints and all the stuff you'd see in an agile world, but you need this top-down. These are resource-aligned capabilities, in which case your market may change from, well, there are a lot of legacy PPM vendors that claim they do these things. Maybe we should broaden our search to those that are more dedicated to the resource management related functions. And maybe I don't need a pure PPM product. Whereas if these are not important to you, and instead these guys here under legacy PPM are really where you're focusing, then a more traditional, conventional PPM vendor might be the best fit. If nothing under RM or legacy PPM is of interest, and really you're stuck here with task sequencing, again, it's a whole different discussion, and a pure play PPM platform may not be the right option either. Now, when you take these various features and capabilities and you now integrate them with your use cases, this is really where you should take your next step. So you've identified your use cases, you've pulled together an inventory of these various features, and we're happy to share this document, deck, and other materials after if you're interested, and we're happy to assist, of course, is now mapping your use cases to each of these various features and capabilities. It does not have to be a next level genetic algorithm to perform this. You don't need some dynamic planning routine. We can start very simple. In fact, it's much easier to interpret the data when we boil it down to our core use cases and a matrix of these various features. And our next step here is to now essentially create a heat map. Now you can do sort of maybe color coding or scoring of these relationships to say use case 1 requires a 5 out of 5 around scenario analysis, or a 5 out of 5 under resource management, 5 out of 5 on top-down t-shirt sizing, or maybe a 1 out of 5 on demand management. You can certainly do that. But I think starting with a very simple approach of just binary, on or off, color coding these cells or ones or zeros for each use case will give you a starting point for where you're clustering in terms of what features are most relevant to the use cases that you're working through. And that's a starting point, and for most is going to be more than what's needed and help you drive a very robust planning exercise in terms of which PPM product or related product category is going to be most useful in terms of how we manage this problem. Now, what I've got here is a use case or a case study from a client. We won't share their name. We'll just call them Company B. But they were in a situation like some of you likely are. They had a failed deployment. In their case, they had Broadcom or CA's Clarity PPM product. Very expensive, very large and complex implementation, very difficult to turn on new features. This company is US-based, but similar to customers we have all over the world. It was the IT department, over 500 resources, several hundred projects a year, large financial services business, very high dollar spend on the PPM product, but near negative ROI. Again, things were floating around in spreadsheets. The promises of the vendor didn't come to fruition. And also there was a misalignment in philosophy, right? So, and also very high pro services. So anytime a new feature had to be turned on, licensing wise, they were okay. Now they were spending massively, but it required a significant amount of time from their standpoint and a significant investment in professional services to help enable and turn on the various features. So what they did, and we met them as they moved through this process, they followed a very similar process, is they stepped back and they reevaluated their core use cases. They had around 4 use cases, mostly around the process of high-level sizing of work, planning and replanning their work, whether it was monthly or quarterly, as well as creating sort of a demand factory of intake, working through approval processes for projects, but then more importantly, an approval process for the allocation of generic resources to then named individuals, and understanding those gap analyses and be able to run scenario planning on that information. So a fairly common challenge. Now, when they arrayed their use cases against these core capabilities, what they found was a clustering around, let's move to the next slide here, a clustering around the resource management related areas. So quite a bit of high scoring on resource management, on top-down t-shirt sizing, and also the involvement of resource request workflow, skills management, core RM functionality. So clearly in this case, they were able to identify that philosophically, they were a more resource-oriented business, or at least their current challenges and what they wanted to solve pointed them to the direction of being resource-oriented philosophically. Now, they also had a number of requirements, and you'll see those here with the green bar, along 3 more traditional core PPM capabilities. So there was a need for demand management, there was a need for financial management, and was a need for reporting and business intelligence. And from their standpoint, and this again aligns with how we think, was that they wanted to find the best possible solution that could deliver a 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10 on all of their core resource management requirements, which is really where it had clustered and where they needed to be and what problems they had to solve. But that vendor they selected needed to be good enough, provide 80% of what the best of breed could give them around demand management, intake workflows, reporting and BI, and financial management. So they conducted a fairly detailed vendor bake-off. It was us and a number of other very well-known names, and then some others you may not have heard of. And ultimately, they selected us. Now, this is a case study in not just vendor approach to evaluation, but also in implementation. And because of this close philosophical alignment and such tight use case to feature mapping, this was a successful deployment that moved data out of that system that was being removed into Tempus, system configured, reports configured, and made available to end users, with end users trained, and then had gone live in under 5 weeks. So a huge success for this customer, and we've had a few others in sort of the same category that have actually had even better success with regards to time to value, even faster than 5 weeks, believe it or not. But I think here what the critical point was that identification of that philosophical orientation, which was pulled from the use case to feature mapping, and that then played a huge role in the vendor evaluation. And later we did receive information from them where I was able to map how they did the work directly to how I'm showing you today. So again, a tested technique that's worked for a number of customers, in this case in our favor. In other cases, it would not work in our favor. If it was very heavy in the financial management and they needed much more complex workflow of stage gates with document approvals and check-ins at every stage gate and financial approvals at every gate, then maybe we're not the right fit. But again, in this case, being so tightly centered and clustered around resource management is a very clear fit, which guided their decision making, ultimately leading to a very successful implementation. Now, if we drill a bit deeper into how they viewed the world, and this pulls from sort of the main vendors. So it was Planisware, PlanView, ServiceNow, Monday, and us. And again, given the clustering of those requirements by the customer, those were what they were really measuring most heavily on. Now, everyone had to kind of check the box. Could you handle the financial management stuff? Did you have advanced BI reporting capabilities? And the answer, of course, we had that, and some of these others do, some don't. But for them, the biggest ones and most important were what if analysis and scenario planning, ease of use and user interfaces, especially around resourcing, customizable planning metrics, planning by FTE, by man days, by hours, by cost, and being able to convert instantly. And there was also a fiscal period requirement as well. Resource request workflows and skills matching. And then also how quickly could they roll things out. And then in every scenario, pricing will play a part. Like, you can't divorce your decision making from that side of things, and there's more to share on that in a moment. But obviously we're built to solve these specific problems. So we score a 4 out of 4. I mean, we nailed all of these, and when we received their internal review, we clearly found that we were the best fit. But again, other vendors not clearly built around this resource management challenge weren't even close in terms of addressing these core capabilities. And then when you look at the time to deploy, which should be another vector that you consider in this, is just how quickly can I get value out of the system, others required substantial implementation services and huge runways in order to start seeing value. And then also all of these guys here, some of which it's actually a little surprising, were nearly an order of magnitude more expensive than we were. And this is something I'll talk about as we get into looking at vendors, and I have it in the top right here, is you want to create and find an asymmetric balance. You might just call it value. I have a fancier term for it for a reason we'll talk about, which is you want to minimize the cost and maximize the capability that you're buying because of the embedded option value of all those distinct features that you may not find relevant when you first procure that particular platform. But again, you want to find vendors offering you the most bang for the buck. I mean, that's the most important thing here. And there's very specific reasons why that we'll get to in a moment, right? And I would encourage you to build out, again, when doing vendor evaluation, something similar to this. What are your core features and use cases, and how do those map, and how does each vendor meet and or exceed those different use cases and feature requirements? All right. Now, moving on to the vendor evaluation process, and this is where we get to share some really interesting information with you, at least I think, is first, how do you find the different vendors to work with? And I would encourage you, obviously, to take a look at things like the Gartner Magic Quadrant. You can look at Forrester. There's others out there that publish lists, but also don't limit where you're searching. You can do simple web searches, look in peer review. They'll have other names in there beyond those that are in the MQ or other Gartner research. We've used this technique when evaluating products internally and have found amazing products that were never even covered by the analysts. So cast a wider net than you may expect. Two is, identify that philosophy and try to understand that vendor's philosophy. It could be as simple as asking them, how tightly are you aligned around these different core critical dimensions that align with your philosophy? It's really important to even start there. This may allow you to weed out vendors that just shouldn't play a role in this process period out of the gate, which will save you a lot of time and a lot of effort, especially as you go through evaluating, trialing, testing, walking through different use cases with the vendor or on your own. And understanding that philosophical alignment early is going to save you a lot of time. Another thing you want to look at is the pace of innovation. And a few things here. One, do you see a fairly linear growth pattern in terms of capability? And they might be above where you need to be now, but what does that curve look like? How steep is that curve? And ideally, you want that vendor to prove historically that they have continually launched new capabilities over time that are substantial. And they should be willing to share that information and share historical release notes with you and kind of walk you through the evolution of the product. The other thing you want to be careful about is looking for step changes on those curves. So if it's not sort of a linear line pointing up, or at least on a high angle, when you start to see big step changes where suddenly it's flat and then there's a big pop, flat, then a big pop, that typically indicative of an acquisition-based strategy where a customer or a vendor starts with a particular product, then goes out and buys something that maybe has, okay, that's our road mapping product, we bought that, now we're flat, now let's go buy maybe a task tool. And what you're getting is an amalgam of various products that individually weren't really platforms to begin with, and that's being pushed to the market. So be real careful about those when you see those step changes to better understand how effectively can you integrate multiple acquired businesses to create a platform versus having a purpose-built platform from the ground up. And again, that may be just your preference, but something to be cautious about. Number 4, understand ownership. Is the company public? Is it private? Is it PE owned? There are pros and cons to each of these. We're privately held, which lets us think and act very differently. Public and PE owned companies are going to operate very differently as well. The way they make decisions will be very different than a privately held business. How they handle changes to cost, how flexible are they with you around pricing, how flexible are they with you when you tell them, hey, we had a RIF and we need to adjust our budget, can you work with us? Or, hey, we've got some challenges in our business, or we'd like to move forward, but we have this budget, we don't have that budget. Well, are they willing to work with you? And that also ties in with number 6 around ease of doing business with. So just be aware of that. And also with number 4, and this is something we hear a ton when we talk to customers that move to us from other vendors or at least are exploring it, is the support they're getting. So don't discount support. Support might be one of the most important factors as you evaluate different vendors. Understand, talk to others out there, look at their reviews, understand how high quality is the support, how quickly do you get answers, or are you kind of left on your own once you've bought and it's, hey, thanks for buying, we'll see you at renewal time, until then we're not going to talk to you. So really think about that because it means a ton. Number 5, and this is one that you may not think about, but you have to be really weary of, and I'll leave out some details, but is there a platform risk? And what do I mean here? There are products in the market that claim to be these big, capable platforms that really just built on Microsoft or built on Salesforce. In those cases, you're really buying 2 separate platforms and 2 separate vendors. And I can assure you, Microsoft clearly doesn't want to play in that space. So having a product built on top of it is really just a professional services sort of ploy. They're putting together widgets and different modules to extend a Microsoft platform. You're not getting a code base designed from the ground up to solve this problem. You're getting something built on top of something. That means there's going to be a lot of professional services, typically a lot of add-on stuff, and they're going to be pro services heavy. And again, you're affiliating now with maybe another vendor that you don't want in your ecosystem, and you're now getting married not just to the direct vendor, but also the indirect or their associated vendor at the same time. So be wary of any of those platform risks. Also, number 6 here, how easy is it to do business with the vendor? Will they do a free trial? That should be sort of a cutoff for everyone. You've got to find vendors that'll let you test the product. If there's a lot of pushback, there's a reason for that. If they demand you to pay money to do a trial, you should walk away. It should be free to you, and they should invest their time to assist you in evaluating your use cases, even if they're not a fit. And they should be open in telling you that if that's the case. How flexible are they with regard to licensing? I'd recommend you get pricing and licensing information up front. Don't wait until the very end once you've selected the vendor or have removed the others, because again, if there's a lack of flexibility on pricing or it's going to blow out your budget, should you have even pursued that in the first place? So get pricing information early, identify how easy they are to work with. If there's a lot of pushback there's typically a reason. Could be good, could be bad, but try to get a gut feel for it early. All right, so just some things to think about with vendors. Some other little nuggets to really think about as well. And these won't typically be on the front end of your evaluation, but they really should be, because when you get to the selection process and you go to buy, these things will come up from legal, they'll come up from procurement, they'll come up from compliance, and you need to make sure at the front end of your process that you're addressing these things. And they should be tick boxes. If a vendor can't meet these, you'll either have to work through an exception process internally with compliance or legal, which could be long and drawn out, but it could also be a red flag. So the first of these is around compliance. What is your compliance posture? Are there data sovereignty and data privacy requirements? Are your users global? What protection of PII do you need? Are they a member of any data privacy frameworks? What insurance levels do they hold? And then you may also just want to get out in front of this and talk to your legal and talk to procurement around what are the key sort of table stakes that you need in order to move a vendor forward. And you should then flow that down as part of your evaluation. The second is around security, and that's not just the vendor's security policies, but also the depth and breadth of security capabilities in the product. Within PPM, and I've seen a large array of capabilities from different vendors, your use cases, you'll also want to think dimensionally, what level of security is needed? Who can see what? What do I have to restrict? How many different business units want to play together and have visibility in certain cases, but not in others? So you'll want to think about the level of role-based security that is offered by the vendor. If they bring to market or bring to you, hey, we have these 3 built-in roles and that's it, that may be a huge red flag. Whereas if you're given the ability to create an unlimited number of roles with different security rules, different security access policies, that may be really enabling. So something to look at. Then the vendor itself should also check all the boxes. Are they ISO? Are they SOC compliant? Will they share their reports with you? Typically under NDA, but you'll want to make sure that you get that information, because someone in your organization will want to make sure that was done, or they will have to take it on. And again, if you get to that point and the vendor can't meet any of them, you've just wasted a bunch of your time, because compliance or security is going to say, look, we can't allow this in. You're going to be storing PII information. You'll have company plans. It'll all be considered confidential or above. So you've got to make sure that vendor is invested in security. And the last one here that it's starting to come up more and more is around artificial intelligence. Every vendor's doing stuff around it, but obviously be cautious on being spoon-fed, things that you don't need. A lot of it is, there's a lot of snake oil going around. Also, something to think about around legal and compliance, and we're seeing this increasingly from our customers, is them telling us or asking to ensure that their data, your data, are never used to train another person or another company's model. And in many cases, what we're seeing in the market are prompt-based GPT type of integrations back to the main, known vendors. So essentially, you're taking your data in those cases, allowing it to now be pushed to a separate large model that is learning from your data. And we had a customer, and I've talked a lot about this on other calls with other customers, that a large insurance business, not the one we talked about today, and it's sort of an ancillary discussion, who had told us the reason why they're clamping down is they had agents attending internal meetings. It's a large insurance business, and they were using a third-party AI meeting notes recorder. And it was essentially grabbing all of the information in these internal meetings where very sensitive information is being discussed, and it was being ripped out of the business, sent to who knows where, to be consolidated and made part of a large model as part of an AI system. So when they learned that, obviously they were very concerned and reacted accordingly by locking down and preventing the use of any AI that hadn't gone through any central channel. And we see a lot of customers starting to take a step back and pump the brakes a bit on the incorporation of AI. But you'll want to understand, where does your company's policy, what are they around AI, and do you have to know that when working with a vendor who might lead with, well, we have this AI. You need to know, can that be disabled? How are they handling our privacy information? How do they handle our data? So those are things to be aware of on the AI side. Lastly, optimality of your decision, it goes beyond the immediate fit. And I brought this up a bit earlier, is that you want to find an imbalance between capability and price. So many places would just say, you want to find the best value. But I think it's much more than that. You want this asymmetric capability to price relationship. You can almost think of it like software arbitrage. You're getting a free lunch, something for nothing. And what does this enable? This allows for you to take advantage of future embedded options. So what you might find is that, again, resource management and, let's say, demand management are your two biggest drivers. And that vendor in the middle here had the most capability, and that's why we selected them. They checked all the boxes. But they offer, with their existing licensing, so much additional capability that we're not going to use. But that unused capability has, each one really becomes an embedded option that you may choose to exercise or not. As you evolve with the product, you may choose to exercise those options, which can open all sorts of return on investment. Let's say, and we've had customers that have gone down this path of, for them, resource request workflow, resource management, skills management, those were key. But we also have financial management, we have demand management. Over the years, or over their deployment, they've chosen to enable those other features. There was no new cost, there was no new licensing, but they've now unlocked substantial and additional ROI by simply enabling things they've already procured. And they took advantage of what we believe, and we think we have the best capability to price imbalance that benefits our customers in the market overall. So, clearly you'll prioritize your key use case mapping, but that depth and breadth of additional features that you may not use have embedded option value and can derive or drive additional ROI in the longer term. So just something to think about as part of that evaluation process. All right, lastly, where to go from here. So circling back to this high-level process of identifying your philosophy, identifying your use cases, mapping those use cases to those capabilities, and then weighing and identifying where they cluster. This is really what I encourage you to start with. And identifying your philosophy, again, that may come out of number 4. You may not know this to start. You may start at step 2, which is the use case development, go to 3, mapping your use cases to the PPM capabilities, and then 4, ranking, weighing, and identifying the clustering, which then may tell you, hey, I thought we were task-oriented. It turns out we really are more suited and more clustered around the resourcing philosophy. So I would encourage you to take this as your next step, is to perform that mapping exercise. Now, again, as promised out of the gate, we can absolutely assist you with this. Again, we may not be the right vendor for you, but we have years of experience. We know this market inside and out, and we also gain a lot of information just about the market overall by working with our customers in this regard. We have a PPM assessment offering. We also have a resource management assessment offering. These are not no cost things. This is just us working with you if you choose to take us up on that. And for that, again, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to anybody you've interacted with at ProSymmetry, or just join us on our website to get more information. So I hope this was helpful. Again, this was a bit of a unique approach that we've taken to doing these webinars. We haven't really done one like this in the past, but I thought it'd be timely and helpful given the number of folks we're talking to that really are experiencing this unease around the future of their current PPM platform or where they want to head. with how they size, plan, and execute their work. So if there's any questions, I think we've gone over. Let me check time. Oh, we're sort of just on time, just a few minutes over. So we'll go ahead and close out the webinar. But if there's any questions, again, feel free to reach out to us and we'll follow up separately. But in the meantime, thank you again for joining. I hope this was a good use of your time, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the week. Thank you.